A werewolf shifter romance written by Catherine Stewart. Prologue. The frozen breath of the northern winds carried tales through the ancient forests, tales of shadows and teeth and a bond forged in primal necessity. Elara, an omega within the formidable Northwood pack, moved through her days with a quiet grace, a silent observer in a world that often overlooked the gentle strength that resided within her. Alpha Kaelen, a figure of immense power and unwavering authority, led his pack with a fierce protectiveness, his intense gaze rarely lingering on the unassuming omega who often watched him from the periphery. She was meant to be unseen, a part of the pack's quiet hum. Yet, a deep, instinctual pull stirred within Kaelen's ancient bloodline, a subtle awareness of her scent, like winter roses blooming in the snow, a primal recognition that resonated in the deepest parts of his being. A dangerous awareness, about to shatter the fragile peace of their separate existences. A single, brutal act, driven by instinct and a forgotten lore, would ignite a connection born of terror and profound misunderstanding. And the forgotten Omega might find herself bound to the savage Alpha by a destiny woven in fear, a destiny that held the only shield against a darkness neither of them could yet comprehend. Elara's breath hitched, a ragged gasp lost in the biting wind that whipped through the skeletal branches. Agony still throbbed on her neck, a searing brand left by Kaelen's teeth. Not a tender claiming, not the soft brush of affection she'd sometimes imagined in the quiet solitude of her Omega existence. This was raw, primal, a brutal claiming that felt less like the beginning of a bond and more like a violent tearing. And in that terrifying instant, as the Shadow Creek Alpha's glacial eyes locked onto hers, a cold certainty settled in her heart. Kaelen wasn't just claiming her, he was marking her for a fate she couldn't possibly comprehend, a destiny that felt chillingly akin to death itself. Snow crunched beneath Elara's frantic flight. Each shallow breath burned in her lungs, a stark reminder of the violation. Her small frame, already aching from the sheer force of Kaelen's possessive act, shivered uncontrollably in the icy air. She was an Omega, often overlooked, her gentle spirit a quiet counterpoint to the Shadow Creek Pack's fierce nature. Orphaned young, she'd learned to navigate their rigid social structure by fading into the background, finding solace in the rustling whispers of the forest and the illicit comfort of human books, their pages filled with tales of tenderness and belonging. But Kaelen, he was a force of nature, a storm of untamed power. The newly ascended Alpha, his very presence radiated an authority that brooked no argument, his gaze capable of both piercing scrutiny and a chilling indifference. Yet, something deep within him had shifted, a primal recognition that had flared to life the moment his gaze had snagged on Elara. An instinct, ancient and undeniable, had surged, demanding he claim this unassuming Omega as his own. But the marking, it wasn't the gentle joining of her secret dreams. It was savage, possessive, igniting a terror in Elara that propelled her into the unforgiving depths of the winter wilderness. The wind howled around her, a mournful cry that echoed the fear in her own heart. Her meager supplies, hastily gathered in her desperate escape, offered little comfort against the vast, silent hostility of the forest. Every snap of a frozen twig underfoot, every distant, mournful howl that echoed through the snow-laden trees, amplified the chilling certainty that Kaelen, the Alpha who should have been her protector, was now her relentless pursuer. Back in the heart of the Shadow Creek territory, a tempest of fury and bewilderment raged within Kaelen. Elara's flight wasn't merely defiance, it was a visceral rejection of a bond that resonated deep within his ancient bloodline. It was more than a challenge to his authority, it was a severing of something primal, something essential that he couldn't fully articulate, only feel in the raw, animalistic depths of his being. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound that spoke of both fury and a deep, unsettling confusion. "Find her," he'd commanded, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that sent shivers down the spines of his most seasoned trackers. "Bring her back to me. Alive." The last word hung in the frigid air, heavy with unspoken meaning. And so, they were unleashed, his most skilled wolves, their forms swift shadows against the pristine white landscape, their senses honed to the faintest trace of Elara's panicked flight. Kaelen himself, shifting into his powerful wolf form, a creature of immense shadow and muscle, moved with a single-minded determination, driven by an instinct older than memory, a primal urge to reclaim what his very being recognized as his. The scent of her fear, sharp and intoxicating, pulled him forward. Elara's dreams, once filled with the faint whispers of belonging, now echoed with the chilling sound of pursuit, the phantom weight of Kaelen's teeth on her neck. She clung to the desperate hope of finding sanctuary, a place where she could finally be safe, where her quiet spirit wouldn't be seen as weakness. Perhaps there were other outcasts, a hidden haven beyond the reach of Shadow Creek's harsh laws. Kaelen's desires, however, were rooted in the ancient, primal laws of their kind. He knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his bones, that the Luna's presence, marked and bound, was vital for reasons that lay shrouded in the mists of forgotten tradition. He felt the wrongness of her flight, the illogical severing of a bond that should have resonated within her as deeply as it did within him. But his primal instincts, the ancient laws etched into his very being, offered no language for gentle persuasion, no bridge across the chasm of fear that now separated them. The stark contrast between Elara's fragile form against the overwhelming power of the winter wilderness was a visual testament to her isolation. The skeletal trees, their branches like frozen claws reaching out to ensnare her, seemed to mirror the terror that clutched at her heart. With each stumbling step, her shivering intensified, her meager supplies dwindling, the vast, silent emptiness amplifying her fear. And then, there was Kaelen, a shadow of immense power, his pursuit a relentless, unwavering force against the pristine white landscape. His intense, glacial gaze, the same gaze she had always misinterpreted as predatory, now drove his every movement, a primal need etched into the powerful lines of his wolfen face. The wind carried his scent, a potent mix of pine and something wild, something undeniably him, a constant, terrifying reminder of her pursuer. Exhausted, her limbs heavy with cold and fear, Elara pressed onward, the biting wind a relentless tormentor. Just as her vision began to swim, just as the icy grip of despair threatened to consume her, a flicker of darkness against the white caught her eye. A small, seemingly abandoned trapper's cabin, nestled amongst the snow-laden pines, a fragile promise of shelter in the desolate expanse. With the last dregs of her strength, she stumbled towards it, the creaking wooden door groaning open like the maw of some ancient beast. But as her eyes adjusted to the dim interior, a new wave of unease washed over her. Carved deep into the rough-hewn logs were markings, claw-like and intricate, that pulsed with a strange, unsettling energy. They felt ancient, primordial, triggering a fear that went beyond Kaelen's pursuit, a primal disquiet that resonated in the very marrow of her bones. The air inside was thick with the scent of decay and something else, something metallic, like old blood. And in those strange markings, my dears, lay the first, chilling whisper of a truth far more ancient and far more dangerous than Elara could ever imagine. A truth that would soon bind her fate to the savage Alpha in ways that would shatter everything she thought she knew about fear, about love, and about the very nature of their being. A small, crudely drawn symbol, etched deeper than the rest, pulsed with a faint, inner luminescence, a soft golden light that seemed to thrum with a hidden power. Elara reached out a trembling hand, drawn by an instinct she couldn't name, and the moment her fingertips brushed against the cold wood, a jolt of energy shot up her arm, leaving her breathless and filled with a sudden, inexplicable sense of dread. The wind outside howled louder, as if in response, and the shadows within the cabin seemed to deepen, to writhe with a life of their own. This was more than just an abandoned shelter, this was a place steeped in a forgotten history, a history that was about to collide violently with Elara's desperate flight. Meanwhile, far away, Kaelen paused, his powerful body tense. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a feeling akin to alarm. The wind carried a faint scent, not just Elara's fear, but something else, something ancient and unsettling that made the fur on his back bristle. He didn't understand it, but a primal instinct screamed at him to change course, to move faster. Elara was walking into danger, a danger far greater than himself. He just didn't know what it was yet. The urgency of his pursuit intensified, a frantic need to reach her before what? The question hung unanswered in the frigid air, a dark premonition that clawed at his gut. He pushed his pack harder, their powerful forms blurring through the snow-covered landscape, driven by their alpha's unspoken fear. Elara huddled deeper within the shadows of the cabin, the golden symbol on the wall seeming to pulse with a malevolent energy. The air grew colder, a bone-chilling cold that had nothing to do with the winter outside. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering uncontrollably. This place, it felt wrong. Danger radiated from the very wood of the walls. She had to leave. Now. But as she turned to flee, a low growl echoed from the doorway, a growl that wasn't Kaelin's. A pair of glowing red eyes pierced the darkness, and a hulking shadow filled the entrance. Not Kaelen. Bigger. More feral. Fear, colder and more paralyzing than anything she'd felt before, gripped her. Her desperate flight had led her not to safety, but into the jaws of something far more terrifying than the savage alpha who hunted her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence that held its breath in anticipation of the coming storm. The hulking shadow that filled the doorway was not Kaelen. This creature, it radiated a different kind of menace, a raw, untamed savagery that made the very air crackle with danger. Its eyes, glowing with a malevolent red light, locked onto Elara, and a low growl rumbled in its chest, a sound that spoke of hunger and a brutal intent. Elara's breath hitched in her throat, a silent scream trapped within her lungs. This was it. Her desperate flight from one predator had led her straight into the lair of another. Before she could even think to move, the creature lunged. But then, a blur of dark fur erupted from the shadows behind Elara. A snarl ripped through the air, a familiar, guttural sound that made her heart leap with a desperate, impossible hope. Kaelen. He had found her. The two massive werewolves collided in a whirlwind of teeth and claws, the air thick with the scent of blood and primal fury. Elara scrambled back, pressing herself against the cold, decaying wood of the cabin wall, her eyes wide with terror and a flicker of something akin to disbelief. Why was he here? Why was Kaelen, the alpha who had marked her in such a brutal way, now fighting to protect her? The battle was a brutal ballet of tooth and claw. The rogue werewolf, larger and more feral than any she had ever seen, fought with a desperate savagery. But Kaelen moved with a fluid power, his every strike precise and deadly. He was a whirlwind of dark fur and lethal intent, driven by a primal protectiveness that Elara couldn't reconcile with the agonizing memory of his marking. What do you mean? She pressed, needing answers, needing to understand the terrifying new reality she had been thrust into. Kaelen stopped, turning to face her. His glacial eyes searched hers, and for the first time, Elara saw a flicker of something beyond the possessive alpha, a hint of vulnerability, a raw, primal fear that mirrored her own. The marking, Elara, he said, his voice low and grave. It is not just a claim. It is a shield. An ancient protection against things like that. He gestured back towards the cabin with a grimace. Unmated Luna bloodlines, they are vulnerable. They attract unwanted attention. Unmated Luna bloodlines? Elara frowned, confusion warring with her fear. She was an Omega. Not a Luna. I don't understand, she stammered. Kaelen sighed, a rough sound that spoke of frustration and a deep weariness. It is a long story, Elara. A story our pack has forgotten, for the most part. But I have always known. It is in my blood. The alphas of my line, we carry the knowledge. The responsibility. He looked at her, his gaze intense. You, Elara, you are of a Luna bloodline. A strong one. That is why, he hesitated, his gaze flickered down to the mark on her neck. That is why the instinct to mark you was so strong. So urgent. His words were starting to make a terrifying kind of sense. The brutal marking, the possessive claim, it hadn't been an act of aggression, but an instinctive act of protection. A shield against the red-eyed creature, against other things? So, you marked me, to protect me? The words felt foreign on her tongue, a stark contrast to the terror she had felt in that moment. Kaelen nodded, his gaze unwavering. It was the only way. The only way to shield you. Shield her? From what? The rogue werewolf was dead. What other threats lurked in the shadows? But, why didn't you just tell me? The question was a raw whisper of hurt and confusion. Why had he put her through such terror? Kaelen's jaw tightened. There was no time. And, the knowledge has been lost to most. I knew only the instinct, the primal urge. The words, they would not have conveyed the urgency. The danger. His explanation was unsettling. It didn't excuse the pain, the fear. But it offered a different perspective, a terrifying glimpse into a world far more dangerous and far more complex than Elara had ever imagined. As they continued through the silent forest, the weight of Kaelen's words settled upon Elara. The brutal marking, the relentless pursuit, it had all been driven by a need to protect her from an unseen enemy. A terrifying enemy that preyed on unmated Luna bloodlines. And she, a seemingly insignificant Omega, was somehow the target. The realization sent a fresh wave of fear through her, colder and more insidious than her fear of Kaelen. Because this was a threat she couldn't see, couldn't understand. A shadow lurking in the ancient corners of their world. What is it? She finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. What is it that wants unmated Lunas? Kaelen's gaze darkened, his powerful body tensing. Something old. Something hungry. It feeds on their life force. Their power. He hesitated, his gaze flickered down to the mark on her neck again. The mark, it makes you unappetizing to it. Unappetizing. The word was chillingly clinical, yet the fear in Kaelen's eyes was anything but. How do you know all this? Elara pressed, needing to understand the source of his knowledge. My bloodline, he repeated, his voice low. The alphas of my line, we carry the memories. The warnings. It is a burden we have borne for generations. A burden he had now thrust upon her. Elara looked down at the mark on her neck, a raw, angry scar that throbbed with a dull ache. It was no longer just a symbol of her captivity. It was a shield against a terrifying unknown. As they walked, the first rays of dawn began to pierce through the dense canopy, casting long, eerie shadows across the snow-covered ground. The forest, once a place of fear and escape, now felt like a hunting ground, filled with unseen dangers. Elara clung to Kaelen's hand, her fear of him slowly being replaced by a grudging sense of reliance. He had hurt her, terrified her. But he had also saved her life. Twice. The path ahead was uncertain, shrouded in the mists of ancient lore and unknown threats. But one thing was clear, Elara's life had changed forever. She was no longer just an Omega, a forgotten member of the Shadow Creek pack. She was something else now. Something protected. And the savage Alpha who had marked her in fear was now her only lifeline against a darkness she couldn't even begin to comprehend. The fragile seed of a terrifying new reality had been planted, and Elara knew, with a chilling certainty, that their journey had just begun. The hunt was over, but the true danger, the true fight, was just beginning. The first rays of dawn painted the snow-dusted forest in hues of soft pink and pale gold, a stark contrast to the chilling reality of Kaelen's words. Elara walked beside him, her hands still clasped in his, the initial shock of his revelation slowly giving way to a fragile sense of, what? Not quite trust, not yet. But the raw fear in his eyes when he spoke of the ancient entity, the fierce protectiveness in his actions, it was hard to dismiss. So, Elara began, her voice still a little shaky, this entity. It wants unmated Lunas. Why? Kaelen's grip tightened on her hand. Their bloodlines hold a certain resonance. A power that this shadow can feed upon. It weakens our kind, Elara. It has plagued us for centuries. And the marking, it stops that? He nodded, his gaze sweeping the silent trees. It creates a dissonance. A magical barrier that makes your bloodline unpalatable. Invisible to it. Invisible. The thought offered a sliver of comfort in the face of such terrifying knowledge. But the image of the red-eyed creature in the cabin still haunted her. But that thing, it found me. It found the cabin, Kaelen corrected, his voice grim. That place, it held a residue. A trace of a Luna who was not protected in time. A Luna who wasn't protected. The implication hung heavy in the air. Elara shivered, despite the warmth of Kaelen's hand. What happened to her? She asked, the question barely a whisper. Kaelen's jaw tightened. She suffered. Greatly. That is why that cabin was marked with those warnings. By her own hand, in her final moments. A wave of sorrow washed over Elara, a sudden connection to a woman she had never known, a woman who had faced the same terrifying darkness. And you knew this? She asked Kaelen, a hint of accusation in her voice. You knew this could happen? I knew the lore, he admitted, his gaze meeting hers, his blue eyes filled with a raw honesty. But the entity, it has been dormant for generations. We believed, hoped, it was gone. Hoped it was gone. But it wasn't. And now, Elara was caught in the middle of an ancient battle she never knew existed. So, what do we do now? The question hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty. We need to get you to safety, Kaelen said, his voice firm. To a place where the protection of the pack is strong. Where the old ways are still remembered. Back to Shadow Creek? The thought brought a fresh wave of unease. How could she return to the pack after fleeing in terror? How could she face the others, knowing what Kaelen had done? Not the main territory, Kaelen clarified, sensing her apprehension. There is a sanctuary. Hidden deep within the mountains. A place where the ancient wards are strong. A sanctuary. The word offered a glimmer of hope. As they walked, the silence stretched between them, filled only by the crunch of their boots on the snow and the distant call of a winter bird. Elara found herself watching Kaelen, studying the hard lines of his face, the way his gaze constantly scanned their surroundings. He was no longer just the savage alpha who had marked her. He was her protector, her only guide in this terrifying new reality. Why didn't anyone else in the pack tell me about this? She finally asked, the question a quiet murmur. About the Lunas, about the entity? Kaelen sighed, a rough sound. The knowledge has faded. The old ways, they are not as strong as they once were. Many dismiss the old tales as just that, tales. My father, he tried to keep the knowledge alive. But even he did not know the full extent of the danger. And you do? I have studied the ancient scrolls. I have listened to the whispers of the wind in the old places. I have felt the stirring of the darkness in my bloodline. His voice was low, almost reverent. The Alphas, we are the guardians. It is our burden to protect the Lunas. Guardians. Lunas. The words felt foreign, yet strangely resonant. Elara, the overlooked Omega, was somehow tied to this ancient struggle. But I'm not a Luna, she said, stating the obvious. Kaelen stopped, turning to face her. He reached out, his large hand gently cupping her cheek. His touch, surprisingly tender, sent a shiver down her spine. You carry the blood, Elara, he said, his voice soft. the potential. And with the marking, you are now bound to that legacy. Bound. The word echoed the possessiveness of his claim, yet now it carried a different weight, a sense of shared destiny. As they continued their journey, the landscape began to change. The gentle slopes of the foothills gave way to steeper inclines, the trees growing thicker, their branches heavy with snow. The air grew colder, the silence more profound. "How far is this sanctuary?" Elara asked, her legs starting to ache. "A few more hours," Kaelen replied, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. "The way is treacherous, but it is well hidden." Treacherous. Of course it was. Nothing in this new reality seemed easy. As they climbed higher, the wind began to howl through the mountain passes, carrying with it the scent of snow and something else, something wild and untamed that resonated deep within Elara's own primal instincts. Despite the fear and uncertainty that still clung to her, a strange sense of anticipation? A feeling that she was moving towards something significant, something that would finally explain the terrifying events of the past few days. Hours later, just as the last rays of sunlight began to fade behind the towering peaks, Kaelen led Elara to a hidden crevice in the mountainside. A narrow passage, concealed by a thick curtain of snow-laden vines, opened into darkness. "This is it," Kaelen murmured, his voice low. "The sanctuary." He stepped into the darkness, his hands still firmly clasped around hers, guiding her through the narrow passage. The air inside was warmer, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. As they moved deeper, the passage opened into a vast cavern, illuminated by the soft glow of strategically placed crystals embedded in the walls. And then Elara saw them. Werewolves. But not like the ones she knew from Shadow Creek. These were different. Their eyes glowed with an inner light, their movements were graceful and deliberate, and an aura of ancient power seemed to radiate from them. They turned as Kaelen and Elara entered, their gazes sharp and assessing. A figure stepped forward, his fur the color of moonlight, his eyes a wise and gentle silver. He carried an air of quiet authority. "Kaelen," the silver wolf rumbled, his voice resonating through the cavern. "You have returned. And you have brought," his gaze settled on Elara, his silver eyes filled with a knowing that made her breath catch. "The Marked One." Marked One. The term echoed Kaelen's words, solidifying Elara's new, terrifying reality. She was no longer just Elara, the Omega. She was the Marked One, bound by blood and a primal claim to an ancient destiny. And as the silver wolf's gaze held hers, Elara felt a strange sense of recognition. As if, deep down, a part of her had always known this was coming. "Elder Theron," Kaelen replied, his voice respectful. "I have brought Elara." The entity, it has stirred. A ripple of unease went through the assembled werewolves. Elder Theron's silver eyes narrowed. "The signs, we have felt them. But we had hoped." "Hope is a fragile thing," Kaelen interrupted, his gaze hardening. "The cabin, it was attacked. By one of its servants." A collective gasp filled the cavern. Servants. The entity had servants. The terrifying scope of the danger Elara faced began to widen, stretching far beyond the confines of the Shadow Creek territory. Elder Theron stepped closer to Elara, his silver eyes studying the mark on her neck. A low murmur escaped his lips, a sound that held both sorrow and a strange sense of hope. "The blood is strong," he murmured, his gaze lifting to meet Elara's. "The ancient protection, it has been invoked." Protection. The word echoed Kaelen's explanation, but hearing it from this ancient, powerful werewolf carried a different weight, a sense of ancient magic and unwavering certainty. "She does not understand," Kaelen said, his voice low. "The knowledge, it has been lost to her pack." Elder Theron nodded, his silver eyes filled with understanding. He turned to Elara, his gaze gentle yet piercing. "Welcome, Elara of the Luna bloodline," he said, his voice resonating with an ancient power. "You have been marked by fate. And though the path ahead will be fraught with peril, know this, you are not alone. Not alone." The words offered a small spark of comfort in the overwhelming darkness. Surrounded by these powerful, enigmatic werewolves, in this hidden sanctuary deep within the mountains, Elara felt a fragile sense of belonging. A feeling that, despite the terror and uncertainty, she had finally found a place where she was not just seen, but recognized. "We will teach you," Elder Theron continued, his gaze unwavering. "We will guide you. You must learn to understand the power that flows within your blood. The power that the entity seeks to consume." Power? Elara, the quiet Omega, held a power that could attract such a terrifying darkness? The revelation was both frightening and strangely empowering. "And Kaelen?" she asked, her gaze shifting to the Alpha who stood beside her, his presence a silent promise of protection. Elder Theron's silver eyes held a knowing glint. "Kaelen has followed his instincts. The bond between Alpha and Luna bloodline, it is ancient. Powerful. It will be your greatest strength." Bond. The word echoed the possessiveness of Kaelen's claim, but now it resonated with a deeper meaning, a sense of intertwined destinies, of a connection forged in fear but potentially blossoming into something far more profound. As Elder Theron spoke, Elara looked at Kaelen, truly looked at him for the first time. Beyond the savage Alpha, beyond the brutal marker, she saw a fierce protectiveness, a raw determination, and something else, a flicker of something that might, one day, resemble affection. The path ahead was still shrouded in darkness, filled with ancient enemies and terrifying unknowns. But standing beside this savage Alpha, in this hidden sanctuary, Elara felt a fragile tendril of hope begin to bloom in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, love could indeed ignite from the ashes of fear. Elder Theron's words resonated through the cavern, settling deep within Elara's heart. The bond between Alpha and Luna bloodline, it is ancient. Powerful. It will be your greatest strength. She glanced at Kaelen, who stood beside her, his powerful presence a silent reassurance in this strange, new world. His gaze met hers, a flicker of something intense and possessive, yes, but also, something akin to protectiveness. "We will begin your training at dawn," Elder Theron continued, his silver eyes holding Elara's. "You must learn to harness the power within you, Elara. It is the only way to truly protect yourself." "Training?" Elara echoed, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. What kind of training did a former Omega need to face an ancient, malevolent entity? "The power of the Luna bloodline is not one of brute force," Elder Theron explained, his voice gentle but firm. "It is a power of connection, of healing, of essence. You must learn to feel it, to guide it, to wield it." He turned to Kaelen. "You will guide her, Alpha. The bond between you will be the key." Kaelen nodded, his gaze never leaving Elara's. "I understand." The other werewolves in the cavern shifted, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Elara felt a flush creep up her neck. To be the center of such attention, after a lifetime of being unseen, it was overwhelming. "Rest now, Elara," Elder Theron said, his voice softening. "Tomorrow, your true journey begins." He gestured to a smaller alcove carved into the cavern wall, where soft furs had been laid out. Elara nodded, her legs feeling heavy with exhaustion and the weight of everything she had learned. She moved towards the alcove, Kaelen following close behind. "Elara," he murmured as she settled onto the furs. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "Are you all right?" She looked up at him, truly looked at him. The harsh lines of his face seemed softer in the dim light of the crystals. The glacial coldness in his eyes was tempered by a flicker of concern. I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Everything, it's just so much. Kaelen knelt beside her, his large hand hovering near hers, not quite touching. I know this has been difficult. For you. Difficult was an understatement. Terrifying, brutal, life-altering, those words felt closer to the truth. But she didn't say them. Instead, she asked, "Why didn't you tell me any of this before?" His gaze dropped to the floor. I didn't know how. The words, they felt inadequate. And the instinct to mark you, it was so strong, so primal. It left little room for gentleness. His admission was surprising, a crack in the seemingly impenetrable wall of the savage Alpha. Gentleness? Elara echoed, a hint of bitterness in her voice. Kaelen's gaze snapped back to hers, his blue eyes filled with a raw intensity. I did what I had to do to protect you, Elara. That is all that mattered. His words were firm, unwavering. Yet, beneath the surface, Elara sensed a conflict, a struggle between his primal instincts and something else, something that felt almost regretful. But you terrified me, she whispered, the memory of his teeth on her neck still vivid. A muscle twitched in Kaelen's jaw. I know. And for that. It was necessary. He couldn't bring himself to utter an apology, but the raw honesty in his eyes spoke volumes. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft crackling of the crystals in the cavern walls. Elara looked away, her gaze drawn to the intricate patterns woven into the furs beneath her. Rest now, Elara, Kaelen said again, his voice softer this time. He rose and moved towards the entrance of the alcove, his large form a silent sentinel. Elara watched him, a strange mix of fear and a hesitant curiosity swirling within her. He was her captor, yes, but also her protector. The savage Alpha who had marked her in fear was now her only shield against a terrifying darkness. Sleep came fitfully, filled with fragmented dreams of red eyes and shadowy figures. But even in her sleep, she felt a strange sense of Kaelen's presence nearby, a silent reassurance that she was not alone. Come morning, Elder Theron greeted Elara with a gentle smile. Are you ready, child? Elara nodded, a nervous flutter in her stomach. Kaelen stood beside her, his gaze steady and unwavering. Their training began with simple exercises, focusing on Elara's senses, teaching her to feel the subtle energies that flowed through the cavern, through the earth itself. Elder Theron explained the connection between the Luna bloodline and the natural world, the ability to draw upon its power for healing and protection. Feel it, Elara, Elder Theron would say, his voice a soothing rumble. The life force that surrounds you. It is within you as well. Elara struggled at first, her senses dulled by a lifetime of being unseen. But Kaelen was a patient teacher, his large hand often resting gently on her back, guiding her, grounding her. His touch, once a source of terror, now held a strange familiarity, a connection that resonated deep within her. Imagine a thread, Kaelen would murmur, his breath warm against her ear as he guided her hand towards a glowing crystal. A thread of light connecting you to it. Feel the warmth, the energy. Slowly, tentatively, Elara began to feel it, a subtle hum beneath her skin, a warmth that spread through her limbs. It was a strange sensation, both unsettling and exhilarating. Days turned into weeks. Elara's training intensified. She learned to meditate, to quiet her mind and listen to the whispers of the earth. She learned to draw upon the energy around her, to channel it for healing, for defense. Kaelen was always by her side, his presence a constant source of strength and guidance. Their interactions, once filled with fear and suspicion, began to shift. They spoke more, sharing stories of their past, their hopes for the future. Elara learned about Kaelen's responsibilities as Alpha, the weight of his lineage, the burden of the ancient knowledge he carried. He, in turn, learned about Elara's quiet strength, her hidden kindness, the fierce loyalty that lay beneath her gentle exterior. One evening, as they sat by a crackling fire in the heart of the cavern, a comfortable silence settled between them. Elara found herself watching Kaelen, the flames dancing in his blue eyes, softening their usual intensity. "Why did you never find a Luna before?" she asked, the question a quiet murmur. Kaelen's gaze met hers, a strange sadness flickering within them. "It is not always a matter of choice, Elara. The Luna bloodline, it is rare. And the connection, it must be true. Instinct guides us. I had not found that connection until you." His words, simple and direct, sent unexpected warmth spreading through Elara's chest. As the weeks passed, the bond between them deepened, forged not in fear, but in shared experience and a growing understanding. The possessiveness of Kaelen's initial claim began to transform into a fierce protectiveness, a genuine care for Elara's well-being. And Elara, in turn, found herself looking at him not just as her captor, but as her protector, her guide, and something more? A strange, unfamiliar warmth stirred within her whenever their eyes met, whenever his hand brushed against hers. But the threat of the entity still loomed large, a dark shadow hanging over their fragile peace. Elder Theron had warned them that its servants were growing bolder, their presence felt in the edges of their territory. The ancient wards of the sanctuary offered protection, but they could not keep the darkness at bay forever. One night, a chilling tremor shook the cavern. The crystals flickered violently, their soft glow dimming. A wave of icy cold washed over them, extinguishing the fire in the hearth. "It is here," Elder Theron's voice echoed through the darkness, filled with a grim certainty. "The entity has found us." Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the fragile warmth that had begun to bloom between Elara and Kaelen. The ancient darkness had arrived, and the fragile sanctuary was no longer safe. Their training was over. The true battle was about to begin. And the bond between the savage Alpha and the marked Luna would be tested in ways they could never have imagined. The fragile tendrils of a connection forged in fear were about to be tested in the crucible of a terrifying, ancient war. The chilling tremor that shook the sanctuary was more than just a tremor of the earth, it was a vibration of ancient evil, a cold finger tracing the edges of their haven. The crystals, their soft light flickering like dying embers, cast long, dancing shadows on the cavern walls, amplifying the fear that gripped Elara's heart. The fire in the hearth, moments before a comforting warmth, sputtered and died, leaving behind a biting cold that seeped into her bones. "It is here," Elder Theron's voice, though still resonant, held a note of grim finality. "The entity has found us." Kaelen moved instantly, his powerful body a shield between Elara and the encroaching darkness. His glacial eyes, now blazing with a fierce protectiveness, scanned the cavern entrance, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The comfortable camaraderie that had begun to bloom between them, the fragile tendrils of trust and understanding, were now overshadowed by the immediate, terrifying threat. "Stay behind me, Elara," Kaelen commanded, his voice a low snarl of warning. Elara didn't hesitate. She moved close, the heat radiating from Kaelen's body a stark contrast to the unnatural cold that filled the cavern. The scent of him, once a trigger for fear, now offered a strange comfort, a primal reassurance of safety. The air thickened, the silence stretching, heavy with anticipation. Then, a shadow writhed at the entrance of the cavern, tendrils of darkness snaking across the stone floor. A chilling whisper slithered into their minds, a voice ancient and malevolent, promising pain and oblivion. "The Luna blood, it calls to me," the voice hissed, sending shivers down Elara's spine. Elder Theron stepped forward, his silver eyes glowing with a fierce light. "You will not touch her, Ancient One." "Foolish wolf," the voice hissed, the shadows at the entrance deepening. "The blood is mine to claim." The entity's focus shifted to Elara, and she felt a cold dread wash over her, a sensation of being seen, desired, consumed. It was a violation more profound than Kaelen's marking, a chilling awareness of being prey. Kaelen's grip tightened on Elara's arm, his knuckles white. "It will not have you," he growled, his voice a promise and a threat. The tension in the cavern was palpable, the ancient magic of the sanctuary battling against the encroaching darkness. Elara could feel the power within her stir, a faint hum beneath her skin, a response to the entity's malevolent presence. "You must focus, Elara," Elder Theron urged, his voice calm amidst the rising fear. "Draw upon the energy. The bond with Kaelen, use it." The bond. Elara looked at Kaelen, his intense gaze locked on the swirling shadows. In that moment, something shifted between them. The fear was still there, yes, but beneath it, a new awareness sparked. A connection, forged in shared danger and a growing intimacy, began to hum with a nascent power. "Kaelen," Elara whispered, her voice trembling. His blue eyes flickered to hers, a question in their depths. The thread," she murmured, remembering his guidance during her training. "The thread of light." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He nodded, his gaze returning to the entity, but his hand found hers, his fingers lacing through hers, a tangible link between them. "Feel it, Elara," he murmured, his voice low, a rumble against her ear. "Feel our connection. Let it flow." As their hands clasped, a warmth spread through Elara, a gentle heat that chased away the unnatural cold. She closed her eyes, focusing on the point where their hands met, imagining a thread of light, not just between them, but within her, connecting to the energy of the cavern, to the ancient power of her bloodline. The entity hissed again, its shadowy tendrils reaching further into the cavern. Kaelen tensed, ready to fight. "Not with brute force, Alpha," Elder Theron cautioned. "The Luna's power, it is our defense." Elara took a deep breath, focusing on the warmth in her hand, on the steady beat of Kaelen's heart beside her. She imagined the thread of light growing stronger, brighter, flowing from him to her, from her to the earth, a circle of energy binding them all. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out with her senses, trying to feel the power Elder Theron had spoken of. It was faint at first, a subtle hum beneath the surface. But as she focused on her connection with Kaelen, it grew stronger, a gentle warmth blossoming in her chest. "Imagine a shield, Elara," Elder Theron instructed. "A shield of light, woven from your connection." With Kaelen's hand a steady anchor in hers, Elara focused her intent, picturing a radiant shield of golden light emanating from her, fueled by the bond between them, strengthened by the ancient energy of the sanctuary. The entity's shadowy tendrils recoiled as the faint light touched them, hissing in pain. The chilling whisper faltered. What is this?" the voice rasped, its confidence shaken. "The power of the Luna bloodline," Elder Theron declared, his voice ringing with newfound strength. "Protected by the bond of the Alpha." Kaelen's grip on Elara's hand tightened, a silent surge of energy passing between them. He looked at her, his blue eyes filled with a fierce pride and something else, a dawning wonder. "You are stronger than you know, Elara," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. A flicker of warmth spread through Elara at his words, a feeling that had nothing to do with the magical energy she was channeling. It was a recognition, a silent acknowledgement of a strength she hadn't known she possessed, reflected in the intense gaze of the savage Alpha who now stood beside her, not as a captor, but as a partner. The entity, sensing its vulnerability, lashed out, tendrils of shadow swirling towards them. But Elara's shield of light held firm, deflecting the darkness. The power flowing between her and Kaelen intensified, a tangible connection that hummed with a nascent energy, a silent promise of a deeper bond. "We can push it back," Elder Theron urged. "Together." With Kaelen's strength grounding her and the ancient power of her bloodline awakening within her, Elara focused her will, pushing the light outwards, a radiant wave of energy that slammed into the shadowy entity. The darkness recoiled, its chilling whispers turning into a shriek of pain. Slowly, Painstakingly, they began to push the entity back, the power of their combined strength a beacon against the ancient evil. Elara looked at Kaelen, their eyes meeting in the flickering light of her shield. In his blue eyes, she saw not just protectiveness, but a dawning respect, a fierce admiration. And in that moment, amidst the terror and the ancient magic, a spark ignited between them, a silent promise of a connection that ran deeper than fear, deeper than duty, a connection that felt dangerously close to love. The battle was far from over, but standing side by side, their hands clasped, their hearts beating as one, Elara knew they would face it together. The savage Alpha and the marked Luna, bound by a primal claim and a burgeoning affection, ready to fight for their survival, and perhaps, for something more. Their combined power slammed into the shadowy entity, a radiant wave of light pushing back the encroaching darkness. The cavern pulsed with energy, the ancient magic of the sanctuary and the nascent power of Elara's bloodline intertwining with the fierce protectiveness of Kaelen's alpha instincts. The entity shrieked, its malevolent whispers turning into a tormented wail as it recoiled from their united front. "Push it back, Elara," Kaelen urged, his voice a low growl of effort, his hands still clasped tightly with hers, their connection a tangible conduit of power. "It cannot withstand us together." Elara focused her will, drawing upon the warmth that flowed between them, the unexpected strength that bloomed within her. The image of the red-eyed creature in the cabin flashed through her mind, a stark reminder of the darkness that sought to consume her. But now, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Kaelen, his blue eyes blazing with a fierce determination, his very presence a shield against the terror. Together, she echoed, her voice gaining strength, the power within her resonating with his. They pushed harder, the light emanating from Elara's shield intensifying, pushing the shadowy entity back towards the cavern entrance. Tendrils of darkness writhed and dissipated as they came into contact with the radiant energy. The air crackled with power, the scent of pine and something ancient, something uniquely them, filling the space. "It weakens," Elder Theron's voice called out, a note of hope amidst the intensity of the battle. "Keep pushing." But the entity was ancient, its roots stretching back through centuries of darkness. With a furious roar, it lashed out, tendrils of shadow sharp as blades tearing through the air towards Elara. Kaelen reacted instantly, shifting into his massive wolf form, a blur of dark fur intercepting the attack, his teeth snapping at the encroaching darkness. "Kaelen!" Elara cried out, fear lancing through her as she saw him grapple with the shadowy tendrils. "Focus on the shield, Elara," Elder Theron urged. "He can withstand it. Your power is our greatest weapon." Torn between her fear for Kaelen and the need to maintain their defense, Elara focused her energy, strengthening the shield of light, pushing it outwards with all her will. The entity shrieked again, its attention divided between the resilient light and the fiercely protective Alpha. The battle raged, a desperate dance between light and shadow, between ancient evil and the burgeoning power of a bond forged in fear but now fueled by something akin to love. Elara watched, her heart pounding, as Kaelen, in his wolf form, tore at the shadowy tendrils, his guttural snarls echoing through the cavern. And then, a blast of icy energy erupted from the entity, striking Kaelen, sending him crashing against the cavern wall with a heavy thud. "Kaelen!" Elara's voice was a raw cry of despair. He lay still, his dark fur matted, the unnatural cold emanating from the entity seeming to cling to him. Despair washed over Elara, the light of her shield flickering. The entity turned its full, malevolent attention to her, its shadowy form looming, its chilling whispers promising a swift and agonizing end. But then, something shifted within Elara. A raw, primal fury surged through her, eclipsing her fear. She looked at Kaelen's still form, the bond between them, though strained, still a tangible presence in her heart. And in that moment, the mark on her neck, the brand of his claiming, pulsed with a sudden, intense heat. A surge of raw power erupted from within her, a torrent of golden light that blazed outwards, engulfing the entity in its brilliance. It was the dormant strength of her Luna bloodline, finally awakened, fueled by her love and her desperate need to protect the one who had, in his own savage way, protected her. The entity shrieked, its shadowy form dissolving in the face of her unleashed power. The unnatural cold receded, the crystals in the cavern pulsed with renewed light, and the warmth returned to the air. Elara stood trembling, the golden light radiating from her, her gaze fixed on Kaelen's still form. Slowly, hesitantly, Kaelen shifted back to his human form, his body bruised and battered, but his blue eyes were open, fixed on Elara, filled with a mixture of awe and a profound, raw emotion that mirrored her own. Elara, his voice was a rough whisper, filled with a tenderness she had never heard before. He reached out a trembling hand towards her, and without hesitation, Elara rushed to him, falling to her knees beside him, her hands cupping his face. The heat of his skin against hers was a welcome reassurance. "Kaelen," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "Are you all right?" He managed a weak smile, his gaze never leaving hers. "Now I am." The battle was over, the ancient entity temporarily repelled. But in the aftermath, a new kind of energy filled the cavern, a silent acknowledgement of the profound shift that had occurred between Elara and Kaelen. The possessiveness of his initial claim had been replaced by a fierce, protective love, a bond forged in the crucible of battle. And Elara, the once timid Omega, had discovered a strength within herself she never knew existed, a power awakened by her connection to the savage Alpha who now lay bruised and battered before her, his eyes filled with a love that mirrored her own. Elder Theron approached them, his silver eyes filled with a gentle understanding. "The bond between you is strong, children. Stronger than even the ancient darkness." Kaelen reached up, his hand finding Elara's, his fingers lacing through hers. The touch sent a shiver of warmth through her, a stark contrast to the cold fear of their first encounter. I understand now," Elara murmured, her gaze locked with Kaelen's. "The marking, it wasn't just a claim. It was the only way I knew to keep you safe," Kaelen admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "My instincts, they were right. You are mine, Elara. My Luna. And I will protect you, always." His words resonated deep within her, a primal chord struck within her soul. Luna. The word no longer felt foreign, but like a truth she had always known, a destiny she was now ready to embrace. Days passed in the quiet aftermath of the battle. Kaelen slowly regained his strength, Elara constantly by his side, tending to his wounds, their touch now filled with a tenderness that had been absent in their initial, fear-filled encounters. They spoke in hushed whispers, sharing their fears, their hopes, the unexpected depth of the connection that had blossomed between them. One evening, as they sat together by a rekindled fire, the soft glow illuminating their faces, Kaelen reached out, his hand gently tracing the mark on Elara's neck. "This mark," he murmured, his voice low and husky. "It once represented your fear. Now." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. "Now it binds us, Elara. It is a symbol of our bond, our protection, our destiny." His lips brushed against the mark, a feather-light touch that sent a shiver of longing through her. Elara leaned into him, her hand finding his, their fingers intertwining. "I was so afraid," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't understand." "I know," Kaelen replied, his blue eyes filled with a deep remorse. "I was a brute. Driven by instinct. But Elara, my feelings for you, they are more than just instinct now." He cupped her face in his hands, his gaze intense, unwavering. "I love you, Elara. Fiercely. Primally. And I will spend the rest of my life earning your trust, your forgiveness, your love." Tears welled in Elara's eyes, a mixture of relief, joy, and a love that had bloomed in the most unexpected of circumstances. She reached up, her hands covering his, her heart overflowing. I think I'm falling in love with you too, Kaelen, she admitted, her voice trembling. A slow smile spread across Kaelen's face, a smile that transformed his harsh features, revealing a tenderness Elara had never thought possible. He leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was both gentle and fierce, a promise of the deep and abiding love that now bound them. The ancient entity had been repelled, but they knew it would return. However, standing together, their bond a source of strength and love, Elara and Kaelen knew they would face whatever darkness lay ahead, together. The savage Alpha and the marked Luna, their love forged in fire and ancient magic, ready to protect their pack, their sanctuary, and the precious connection they had found in the most terrifying of beginnings. The mark on Elara's neck, once a symbol of fear, now pulsed with the warmth of their love, a testament to their intertwined fates. The kiss that passed between Elara and Kaelen was more than just a joining of lips, it was a sealing of a bond forged in fear and tested by fire. It spoke of a fierce protectiveness that had blossomed into a profound tenderness, a silent promise of shared futures and intertwined destinies. The cavern, once a place of refuge from terror, now felt like a sanctuary of their own making, the soft glow of the crystals casting a warm light on their entwined forms. When they finally broke apart, their foreheads resting against each other, their breaths mingling, a comfortable silence settled between them. The weight of the ancient entity still lingered, a shadow on the edges of their awareness, but for this moment, all that mattered was the undeniable connection that pulsed between them, a tangible heat that went beyond the lingering warmth of their shared power. Elara, Kaelen murmured, his voice a low, husky rumble that sent shivers down her spine. His blue eyes, once glacial, now held a depth of warmth and affection that made her heart flutter. He traced the line of her jaw with a gentle thumb, his touch sending a wave of longing through her. Kaelen, she replied, her voice a soft echo of his, her hand finding his, their fingers lacing together once more. The simple act of touch now held a profound intimacy, a silent conversation that spoke volumes of the journey they had undertaken. Elder Theron watched them with a gentle smile, his silver eyes filled with a quiet wisdom. The bond between Alpha and Luna is the heart of our strength, he said softly. Cherish it, nurture it. It will be your greatest weapon against the darkness. Kaelen's gaze shifted to Elder Theron, a newfound respect in his eyes. We understand, Elder. In the days that followed, the sanctuary became a place of healing, not just for Kaelen's physical wounds, but for the emotional scars they both carried. They spent hours talking, their voices low and intimate, sharing the vulnerabilities they had once kept hidden. Elara learned more about Kaelen's responsibilities as Alpha, the weight of his lineage, the fierce loyalty he held for his pack. He, in turn, listened intently as Elara spoke of her quiet life as an Omega, the yearning for connection she had always felt, the solace she had found in the forbidden human books that now seemed to hold a strange foreshadowing of her own destiny. As they grew closer, the initial fear that had defined their relationship began to dissipate, replaced by a growing attraction, a magnetic pull that drew them to each other with an undeniable force. Their touches lingered, their gazes held a new intensity, a silent language of desire beginning to bloom between them. One afternoon, as they trained together, practicing the channeling of their combined power, their hands brushed, sending a jolt of unexpected heat through them. Kaelen's gaze locked with Elara's, his blue eyes darkening with a desire that mirrored her own. The air around them seemed to crackle with a newfound energy, a tangible awareness of the physical attraction that simmered beneath the surface of their growing affection. Elara, Kaelen murmured, his voice thick with unspoken longing. He took a step closer, his large frame casting a shadow over her. Elara's breath caught in her throat. The scent of him, the familiar mix of pine and something uniquely his, filled her senses, stirring a yearning she had never felt before. Her heart pounded in her chest, a frantic rhythm against the sudden silence of the cavern. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin with a tenderness that made her knees feel weak. His gaze dropped to her lips, and a tremor ran through her. Kaelen, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He leaned closer, the heat radiating from his body enveloping her. Their lips met, tentatively at first, a soft brush that sent a wave of longing through her. Then, the kiss deepened, a silent exploration of the connection that bound them, a merging of tenderness and a burgeoning desire. The days that followed were filled with stolen glances, lingering touches, and whispered conversations that stretched late into the night. The sanctuary, still a refuge from the outside threat, became a haven for their blossoming romance. They trained together, their physical proximity fueling the attraction that simmered between them. The power that flowed between them during their exercises now held a new dimension, a tangible spark of desire that made their skin tingle. One evening, after a particularly intense training session, they found themselves alone in the alcove that had become their shared space. The soft glow of the crystals cast a warm light on their entwined forms as they lay side by side on the soft furs, the silence between them comfortable, yet charged with an unspoken longing. Kaelen turned to Elara, his blue eyes filled with a tenderness that made her heart ache. He reached out, his hand gently stroking her hair, his touch sending a wave of warmth through her. "Elara," he murmured, his voice husky with emotion. I desire you." His words, simple and direct, resonated deep within her. She turned to face him, her gaze meeting his, her own desire reflected in her eyes. "And I you, Kaelen," she whispered, her voice trembling. He leaned closer, their breaths mingling, the unspoken longing between them a tangible force. Their lips met again, this time with a newfound urgency, a silent exploration of the physical attraction that had been growing between them. The kiss deepened, a slow, sensual exploration that spoke of a desire held in check for too long. As the days turned into nights, their physical intimacy grew, a natural progression of the deep emotional bond they had forged. Their touches became more intimate, their kisses more passionate, a silent language of love and desire unfolding between them. The sanctuary, once a refuge from terror, now held the promise of a love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of circumstances, a love that was both their greatest strength and their most cherished vulnerability. The mark on Elara's neck, once a symbol of fear and possession, now felt like a brand of belonging, a testament to the passionate connection she shared with the savage Alpha who had become her protector, her lover, her Luna. The ancient darkness still loomed, but within the warm embrace of their newfound love, they found a strength and a hope that burned brighter than any shadow. Their lovemaking was a slow burn, a gradual exploration of each other's bodies, fueled by a deep emotional connection and a burgeoning passion. Each touch, each kiss, was a testament to the journey they had undertaken, a silent acknowledgement of the fear they had overcome and the love they had found in its place. The sanctuary echoed with their soft moans and whispered endearments, the ancient stones bearing witness to a love that was both primal and tender, a fierce joining of two souls who had found solace and strength in each other's arms. As their physical intimacy deepened, so too did their emotional bond. They spoke of their pasts, their fears for the future, their hopes for the life they would build together. Elara found comfort in Kaelen's strength, his unwavering protectiveness, the surprising gentleness that lay beneath his savage exterior. Kaelen, in turn, found solace in Elara's quiet strength, her unwavering kindness, the fierce loyalty that burned within her gentle heart. Their lovemaking was a testament to their intertwined destinies, a physical manifestation of the bond that had been forged between the Alpha and the Luna bloodline. It was a joining of two souls, a fierce and tender exploration of the passion that had ignited between them. The sanctuary, once a place of refuge from terror, now echoed with their whispered endearments and the soft sighs of their shared pleasure. As they lay entwined in the aftermath of their lovemaking, the soft glow of the crystals illuminating their naked forms, a profound sense of peace settled over Elara. She looked at Kaelen, his blue eyes filled with a love that mirrored her own, and knew that whatever darkness lay ahead, they would face it together, their love a beacon of hope in the encroaching shadows. The mark on her neck, once a symbol of fear and possession, now felt like a brand of belonging, a testament to the passionate and enduring love she shared with her savage Alpha, her protector, her mate. The dawn broke over the mountain sanctuary, painting the snow-capped peaks in hues of soft rose and gentle gold. Inside the cavern, a sense of tranquility had settled, a stark contrast to the terror of the entity's attack. Elara lay nestled in Kaelen's arms, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat a comforting lullaby against her ear. The mark on her neck, once a source of fear and confusion, now felt like a warm brand of belonging, a testament to the fierce and tender love that bound them. "Good morning, Luna," Kaelen murmured, his voice husky with sleep and affection. His blue eyes, filled with a love that still felt new and precious, gazed down at her. Elara smiled, her heart swelling with a happiness she had never thought possible. "Good morning, Alpha." The title, once spoken with a tremor of fear, now held a note of deep affection, a recognition of the man who was both her protector and her beloved. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle and possessive. "Did you sleep well?" "Like the dead," Elara confessed, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "But a happy dead." Kaelen chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "That is the best kind." He leaned down, his lips brushing against hers in a tender kiss, a silent promise of the day to come, a day filled with the quiet joy of their shared existence. In the days and weeks that followed, life in the sanctuary settled into a peaceful rhythm. The threat of the entity still lingered, a distant shadow, but it no longer held the immediate terror it once had. Elara continued her training with Elder Theron, her connection to her Luna bloodline growing stronger, her control over her power more assured. Kaelen remained her steadfast guide and protector, his love a constant source of strength and reassurance. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, their love evolving from a fierce, primal bond into a tender and enduring affection. They shared quiet moments by the fire, whispered secrets under the starlit mountain sky, and found joy in the simple act of being together. The physical attraction that had ignited between them remained a vibrant part of their connection, a passionate expression of their deep emotional bond. One evening, as they stood on a precipice overlooking the vast, snow-covered landscape, the setting sun painting the sky in fiery hues, Kaelen turned to Elara, his gaze filled with a love that took her breath away. "Elara," he began, his voice low and sincere. "You came into my life like a storm, a whirlwind of fear and unexpected strength. You challenged me, you terrified me, and you awakened something within me I never knew existed." He reached out, taking her hands in his grip firm yet gentle. "You are my Luna, the other half of my soul. And I cannot imagine a life without you by my side." He knelt before her, his blue eyes earnest and filled with a love that shone brighter than the setting sun. "Elara of the Luna bloodline, will you be my mate? Will you stand beside me, not just as my Luna, but as my wife, my partner, my everything?" Tears welled in Elara's eyes, her heart overflowing with a love that mirrored his own. The journey that had begun in fear and misunderstanding had led her to this moment, to a love more profound and more enduring than she could have ever imagined. "Yes, Kaelen," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, with all my heart." A slow smile spread across Kaelen's face, a smile that transformed his harsh features into something breathtakingly beautiful. He rose, pulling her into his arms, their embrace a silent promise of their shared future. Their mating ceremony took place under the soft glow of the full moon, surrounded by the ancient stones of the sanctuary and the quiet reverence of Elder Theron and the other members of the Luna bloodline. It was a simple yet profound ceremony, a joining of two souls, a celebration of a love that had defied fear and blossomed in the face of darkness. As they stood hand in hand, bathed in the silvery moonlight, Kaelen's voice, filled with a deep emotion, echoed through the silent sanctuary. "With every beat of my heart, with every breath I take, I vow to love you, Elara. To protect you, to cherish you, to stand by your side through all the joys and all the trials that life may bring." Elara's voice, equally filled with love and devotion, intertwined with his. "And I, Kaelen, vow to be your steadfast partner, your loving wife, the anchor of your soul. Our bond is ancient, our love is strong, and together, we will face whatever the future holds." Their vows were sealed with a tender kiss, a promise of a lifetime of love and devotion. As they looked out at the faces of their new family, a sense of belonging washed over Elara, a feeling that she had finally found her place, not just as a Luna, but as Kaelen's mate, the center of his world. In the years that followed, Elara and Kaelen ruled their pack with a wisdom and compassion that had never been seen before. Their love for each other was a constant source of strength, their bond a powerful shield against any darkness that dared to threaten their peace. The sanctuary flourished under their guidance, becoming a beacon of hope and understanding for all werewolves, a place where the ancient ways were honored and the power of the Luna bloodline was celebrated. They faced challenges, yes, for the ancient entity was not truly vanquished, merely held at bay. But they faced them together, their love a constant source of strength, their combined power and unwavering defense. And with each challenge they overcame, their bond grew stronger, their love deepening with the passage of time. Years turned into decades. Elara and Kaelen watched as their pack grew, their love a shining example for all. The mark on Elara's neck, once a symbol of fear, now held a different meaning for the younger generations, a tale whispered around the fire of a love that had bloomed in darkness and conquered all. One starlit night, as they lay entwined in each other's arms, their silvered hair a testament to the years they had shared, Elara looked at Kaelen, her heart still filled with the same fierce love she had felt that night in the sanctuary. "We did it, my love," she murmured, her voice soft with contentment. "We found our happily ever after." Kaelen's blue eyes, still filled with the same unwavering love, gazed down at her. "Our happily ever after is just the beginning, Luna mine." He leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a tender kiss, a promise of eternity in their shared embrace. And as the moonlight bathed them in its silvery glow, they knew that their love story, born in fear and marked by destiny, would continue to unfold, a timeless tale of a savage Alpha and his gentle Luna, forever bound by a love that conquered all. The mountain sanctuary remained their haven, a testament to their enduring bond and the strength of the Luna bloodline. Under their wise and loving guidance, the pack flourished, embracing the ancient ways while also learning to navigate the changing world beyond their secluded peaks. Elara's gentle spirit and innate kindness brought a new era of understanding and compassion to their community, while Kaelen's fierce protectiveness and unwavering love ensured their safety and prosperity. Years spun into decades, marked by the changing seasons in the mountains and the quiet joys of a life shared. They watched as new generations were born, their own love story becoming a cherished legend whispered around crackling fires on long winter nights. The mark on Elara's neck, once a symbol of fear and a brutal claiming, was now seen as a sign of their powerful connection, a reminder that even the most harrowing beginnings can blossom into the most profound and enduring love. Their bond remained the heart of their existence, a constant source of strength and comfort. They faced challenges, as all lives do, but they faced them together, their love an unbreakable shield against any hardship. The memory of the ancient entity lingered, a shadow in the distant past, but its power held no sway against the radiant love that illuminated their lives and the lives of those they protected. And as the years softened their features and silver threaded through their hair, their love only deepened, becoming a quiet, comfortable understanding, a silent language spoken through gentle touches and knowing glances. They remained each other's anchor, the steadfast center of their world. One crisp autumn evening, as the mountains blazed with the fiery hues of fall, Elara and Kaelen stood hand in hand on the precipice overlooking their beloved sanctuary. The air was still and carried the scent of pine and wood smoke. "Look at our home, my love," Elara murmured, her voice soft with contentment. Kaelen's arm tightened around her, his blue eyes, though faded with time, still filled with the same fierce love he had felt for her from the moment he recognized her as his Luna. "Our sanctuary," he echoed. "Our life." All because of a mark born of instinct and a love that defied fear. He leaned down, his lips finding hers in a tender kiss, a sweet reminder of all they had shared, all they had overcome. And as the stars began to pepper the twilight sky, they stood together, two souls forever bound by a love that had begun with a savage claim but had blossomed into a timeless devotion. Their happily ever after wasn't a single moment, but a lifetime of shared joy, enduring love, and the quiet peace of knowing they belonged to each other, completely and eternally.